All right. And we're live, man. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Fixture Focus, American Hammer's opposition match review show. Very special guest today. And hopefully, this video, especially for those of you in the States, can give you a nice welcome break to everything else that's going on in the world today. A lot is going on, but let's talk a little Premier League action, shall we, Jack? Very special guest, Jack Collins. Some of you may know him from Bleacher Report, where he did the Football Ranks podcast for a while. Now made a little pivot to Ranks FC, and we'll talk all about that too. But also the co-founder of
Co-founder,
Fulhamish.
yeah. We'll go with co-founder. I'm sure Sammy wouldn't be too happy, but we'll go with co-founder for now.
Okay, co-founder of the Fulhamish Podcast. So, Jack, welcome. How you doing, man?
I'm not too bad, mate. Thank you for being here on a busy day, I imagine, but maybe it's a little bit of brief respite for you guys. So,
Absolutely.
Fingers crossed, it's an enjoyable one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very glad to have you on. It's always nice talking to fans. Like, you can talk about West Ham over and over, and you sort of beat on the same drum. So it's nice to sort of get a little break from that. Yeah, and talk to people from different, that support different clubs and whatnot. So let's just dive right into it, man. So let's talk about some origins. First of all, the origins of your Fulham fandom. Like, how did you begin? Because I know, we have a mutual cousin friend of mine, Cornelius, who's a Man United fan, but you're a Fulham fan. So how did you become a Fulham fan?
Cornelius is one of those many people who's in London and supports Man United, isn't he? So you can't really knock him. I'm born and bred London, and my granddad, when he came over from Ireland all these years ago, decided to support Fulham, and has just passed it down through the generations. I'm pretty sure he did it just to wind up his mates who were all QPR. So I think that was basically the reason he decided to go and support Fulham, and from there he put his sons all into it. So 4 of them, they're all Fulham fans, and then me and my brother and my cousins are all sort of third generation. So it stretches back in the family. It's always been a kind of family affair on this side. So yeah, gotcha. It's a long term and long fix, and I was cursed with it from my father, who was cursed with it from his father, and here we are again.
Gotcha. Is QPR Fulham's biggest rival, would you say?
I would say there's basically 4 clubs in West London. So there's Chelsea, obviously, and then there's Fulham and QPR, and then there's Brentford. And it's kind of, for a long period, been that kind of diamond. Chelsea at the top, and then Fulham and QPR are about the same size, and then Brentford are smaller than both. Now, Brentford are doing well, unfortunately, but we've never really considered them a rival in the way that Chelsea probably don't consider Fulham massive rivals. And there's always been a bit of needle with QPR, just because of the 2 teams who tended to be sort of flipping between Championship now and the Premier League and sort of time between those. So I think that's where that developed from, and from there I think they're quite close. Shepherd's Bush, Fulham, not far away from each other, and yeah, it's probably the 2 clubs I think that are closest in stature in terms of how big they are is probably Fulham and QPR.
Gotcha. Okay. Obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, you have a heavy hand in media, sports media, football media specifically. You've been around the block, so to speak. Talk to me a little bit about sort of when you knew that you wanted to do this as a career path type of thing, and when you really knew, okay, this could actually really I could really make a name for myself with this. Just talk to me a little bit about that journalism journey.
Yeah, so I went off to uni to do English. I've always been a football fan. I've been a Fulham season ticket holder since I was 3, but it's one of those things where I've always been in and around the game, but I never saw it as a kind of a passion. I played when I was younger to, not particularly high level. I was in the Brentford Centre of Excellence, and that didn't last very long. I was tiny when I was growing up. I was really small. So it's just one of those things that it never really broke for me. I played then Sunday leagues all the way through to university. Played at university, captained the club at my college, and did all of these different bits. But it was kind of, I was always part of the journalism scene, but I kind of felt like I was going to be a music journalist. That was what my original kind of calling was. I edited the music section of the newspaper, all of these things. And I just did football as a kind of side thing. I did a bit of interviewing on the touchlines for the university firsts and all of those, but nothing major. I used to write match reports for the club because I enjoyed doing it. So when I came out of uni, I applied for all these jobs. Obviously, there's not any jobs in music journalism or football journalism. So I fell into another journalism job, doing some legal stuff. And that's when I met Sammy and we started Fulhamish. And off the back of that, I basically pivoted a bit. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not bad at this. I can look at a game and I can analyze it and I can work out where things are kind of coming from. And ultimately, having done that, I started applying for football jobs, and Bleacher Report was the 337th job I applied for in a period of a year, and the first to give me a shot. And so I walked in there and I joined their social team, which was basically, literally sitting behind doing the tweets and things. And I was like, I could think we should do a podcast. They were like, no, we don't want a podcast. So I basically started my own over the summer of a World Cup called Davor Suker's Left Foot with Sam Tighe and Dean Jones. And they listened to it and they were like, oh, this is quite good. You should do a podcast. And we were like, yeah, that's what we've been saying. So about 6 months of brainstorming later, we launched BR Football Ranks, which was January 2019. Did a year and a half of that, became, a reasonably well-established podcast, and got nominated for a few awards and things. And and unfortunately, we all left Bleacher in the last couple of months. There's been a pivot. The UK office has been downsized. It's nothing, personal, but it's just the way of the world at the moment, I think. And so we decided to stick together and branch out together as Ranks FC. So BR Football Ranks has kind of evolved into Ranks FC, which is now its own little independent franchise. Drops on a Wednesday as Ranks did in the kind of free world, and then we have a Patreon as well, which goes out on a Monday and a Friday, and starting to grow that slowly. So yeah, the next steps are just sort of keep growing that, and hopefully strike a few deals here and there, and get some people to make content again. So that'd be nice.
So was that decision to leave Bleacher Report? And you don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but was that voluntary or was that sort of involuntary?
No, I don't think it was. It's one of those things where we've always talked about trying to make the pod bigger and better, and there is limits to that, because I was still doing social and still doing lots of different things. It was, there were elements to that didn't necessarily work, but it wasn't. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, we all walked out. It was one of those. It was. Just a kind of sign of the times, I think, in many ways, and it was a sad day, and I loved my time at Bleacher, and there's no ill will or hard feelings at all there. It's just come to the end of the road in that regard, and ultimately it's just an opportunity now for us to take things independent and move out on our own. Yeah,
and we'll definitely talk about that a little bit. Going a little bit back and rewinding though, the Fulhamish Pod. You also wrote for another website, I believe, Viva El Fulham.
I worked for a lot of websites in the early days.
Okay, but like that growth of Fulhamish. You said you started with Sammy. What was that journey like? Like, I guess, why start your own podcast, and then how did you see that podcast grow to the point where you're like, oh, this is getting like, because you guys have like what, 9,000-10,000 Twitter followers, so it's pretty sizable pod.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, look, Sammy started. Basically, Sammy was the old match day host on Fulham Radio years back. And when I moved back to London after university, I messaged him saying, because I'd done radio at university, saying, do you want to co-host? And he was like, no. And I was like, fair enough. It's quite reasonable. But a year later, when that all ended up, he basically messaged me back and was like, look, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Would you be interested in being part of it? So there was 5 of us in the start, me, Sammy, Dom, Ben and Farrell, who are all still part of the podcast, and we all basically just kicked it off, and it just was a weekly thing, and we were kind of using the back alleys of Sammy's old studios and his old work, and we sort of botched it together, but it was done in studio, so it sounded good. I think that was the always the thing, and there was potentially a space. There's been some excellent film podcasts over the years. Cottage Talk, Russ Goldman's Cottage Talk is the oldest of the lot, I think, by some distance, and Russ has been doing that from New England for a long time. So it's been, it was, and I think the podcast game is, and probably will be for a while, is quite heavily ahead of the UK in the States. The game and the fact that everyone's kind of at it is just starting to hit in the UK, whereas I think that's been available for a while in the States. So we were kind of catching up. I think there was room for some people who were at games every week, who were able to then just jump into a studio and sit together and chat it through. And I think it was a little bit more offhand, and it just grew from there. Really, we started a website. I started off editing that, and now that's been passed on, and there's a whole kind of element to it where we have writers on board now, like you say, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the whole thing, and it's become this kind of multimedia little platform that holds its own, I think, in quite a weird little world, but it's become reasonably respected. We just signed a deal with The Athletic to become their partnership deal with Fulham this year. So
Awesome.
they've got a new Fulham writer, and we're their kind of podcast for the entire thing. So yeah, it keeps growing and growing, and it's nice to see a passion project grow like that. I think is the truth of it. You know, there's always things with work, and when you're building things in your employment, you're always like, yeah, this is nice, but I'm building it for someone else. Whereas Fulhamish has always kind of belonged to, you know, the five of us and now the team as a whole. And I think that, you know, you look at it now and you think, yeah, that's a nice thing we've built there, and it's good to keep it growing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the Athletic personally. I think their UK and their UK team, their soccer coverage is second to none. And the West Ham correspondent, or one of them, Rashane Thomas,
yeah,
great guy, friend of the program, know him well. Yeah, you're
right.
Yeah, very good writer. Nicest guy too. So yeah, you're definitely in good hands with the Athletic, and I'm sure that'll help it grow. That's great news. I'll probably look. I'm always on that app, so I'll probably listen to the podcast even
You'll have
more
a peek.
now. Yeah, absolutely. And then I know we're flip flopping here, but going to Rinks FC, I mean, that's sort of the newest venture that you guys are taking on. For those who are unfamiliar with even, you know, BR Football Rinks, Rinks FC, what just like briefly, sort of like top level, what type of podcast is it, and what are your goals for it moving forward, do you think?
Well, look, BR Football Ranks was based in the idea that, you know, there's lots of football podcasts out there, and there's lots of brilliant football podcasts out there on both sides of the pond. You know, we have the Guardian Football Weekly here is the biggest podcast in the world, probably at this point, and Totally Show and The Athletic, and they all have football podcasts. And then over your side, obviously, Totally Soccer Show and all of those guys who have been doing it for so long and have such a wonderful audience, and the Cooligans and people like that. So we kind of felt that there was no space to just sit around and chat things through every week. Obviously, you can have discussions and you want to talk about the things that have happened, but I think we felt it needed to be opened up kind of in a little different way to really make things explode. And what we did was we decided to rank things. It was always Sam's thing when he wrote. And so every weekend or every week we get people to, or we ourselves. So this week we ranked the best set piece takers in Europe. Last week, captains in the Premier League based on purely ability, not their captaincy skills, just on literally how good they are right now at kicking a football, basically. And this is how we kind of have always worked. So that's our kind of meat and drink, if you will. That's the bones of the product. And then from on there, and we kind of started off this spotlight thing where we fix our favorite games of the weekend, players to watch over the weekend. And our Monday episode is a post box where we basically just try or a mailbag, if you will. If you basically just try and rattle through as many questions about the weekend's football as possible in an hour. So yeah, it's been really good, and we're excited to take it. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's the truth. You want to be making, if we can make a living off the things we love doing, then that's perfect. And for me, it's about becoming, you know, not just the biggest podcast and the, you know, the widest respected podcast in the world, but also being able to take that onwards and be like, look, when the 2026 World Cup rolls around in America, and look at those things, I want to be part of that and part of that adventure and part of that journey. So I think we've always been a little bit more US focused than perhaps our counterparts on this side of the pond. And I think that maybe gives us a little bit of an edge.
I was about to say, I think that gives you guys an advantage, given the fact that, you know, that the game in the UK, obviously it's not going to grow anymore. I mean, it's already, you know, massively popular. While here in the States, it's growing every day. It's growing. And especially, you mentioned leading up to the 2026 World Cup, especially with a very, I mean, albeit on paper, they haven't done anything on the pitch yet, but on paper, a very young, talented American side coming up through the ranks, no pun intended. Yeah, I think that does put you guys at an advantage. I'm really excited to see what you guys do moving forward with the podcast. Pivoting now to the actual, starting to talk about the actual clubs that will be.
Let's talk West Ham.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we're still close enough to the transfer window, the summer transfer window, to ask your thoughts about how it went for you guys. You guys had, several loan signings. It seems like the biggest one that comes to mind is Loftus-Cheek. You guys extended some contracts as well. But I think the main theme that I take away from Fulham's transfer business this transfer window, as opposed to 2 years ago, before your last promotion, or right after your last promotion, is that you guys did not spend nearly as much as you did
The
last
previous
time,
time, yeah.
which makes sense given the fact that it was sort of a failed experiment and that you guys weren't really even close to surviving. What were your thoughts on the transfer business that you guys pulled off before the season?
So I think Fulham was stuck in a little bit of limbo this year between, yes, the ghost of that 100 million spend, where, as you say, we didn't even come close, and also just having a squad that necessarily wasn't good enough. And I think that's a problem. And you look at championship sides coming up now more regularly, and you think two championship sides tend to go down every year. You know, there are exceptions to this rule, of course, but on the whole, two sides who get promoted tend to get relegated every year. And that means that it's always going to be in a dogfight. And I think if you look at the squad that played on Monday night, there was maybe 2-3 players in there who were part of the side last year: Mitrovic, Bobby Reed, and Tom Kearney. And you look at those players and you think, okay, they fit, but there's not too many others that do. And you saw our poor start to the season. And although it wasn't as bad as I think some people were making out it to be, it was worrying that we didn't look threatening. We didn't look like we had control of games. And if Parker does want to employ this kind of style of we should dominate the ball and we look to really trying to control games with a good tempo and not just be pedestrian, they need the players to pull that off. And I think that what we've ended up doing, and it's taken maybe a little bit too long, the worry you have when you bring all these players in is how long is it going to take them to gel? And it's something you've experienced before. And over at West Ham, it takes a while for teams to get to know each other, and by that time it's often too late, especially if you're in a relegation scrabble. And so I think we've done okay in the transfer market. I think keeping hold of Frank Anguissa was a huge moment for us. I think he could be crucial this season. Lamina looks like he's a really good addition. I'm really hot on Anthony Robinson, who obviously crosses borders a little bit here in that he's a USMNT player as well. But I went on with Jason Davis the other day on the Best Soccer Show to talk about Anthony Robinson, and I think he's really special. I really do. I think he's a very good footballer, and that he is going to kick on now and become that kind of top level left back, and not necessarily just at Fulham. He might end up having a storm of a season. Fulham, whatever happens, and if it doesn't go to plan, we might see him higher up next year even. And I think that in itself is impressive. But on the whole, like, I think we've added actually quite nicely now. It's just a question of, does that translate quick enough into a team that gels together to get ourselves into a decent position to stay up?
Yeah, great analysis there, and totally agree. I'm really looking forward to seeing Robinson continue to grow. Obviously, I'm invested in his growth, and he definitely could be the future left back for us, especially once we get to that 2026 World Cup. I mean, so given all that, and given the fact that you seem to be pretty okay with the transfer strategy and the transfer business you guys conducted on a whole, I guess. Obviously, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your expectation before the season, or your goal before the season, I should say, was to stay up.
17th on goal difference, mate. 17th on goal difference.
17th on goal difference. Very simple. That is the goal. Number one. Doesn't matter how you
That's winning the league.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to assume that that's still obviously the goal. Nothing's changed. You guys haven't started off extremely well, although, and let's just talk about the results so far. One win in the first 7, 5 losses, another draw. But besides, I think, one or two matches, it's not like you guys have been just played off the pitch. You guys have been competitive, slightly unlucky here and there, and then finally you guys get your first 3 points against one of those championship sides that you mentioned, West Brom, who a little close to our heart with Slaven Bilic there. But anyways, after that win, and actually Matthew Howard in the comments, he actually asks, how does Jack feel after Fulham got their first win of the season? So given the first, 7 matches of the season so far, what are your thoughts? Have expectations changed at all? What are you thinking?
No, I think, expectations is potentially the wrong word. I think hopes is and dreams is you stay up now, and you look what Villa did, right? And I think that they stayed up by the skin of their teeth almost by accident, because the teams around them just fell apart. And ultimately, this year have already started to kick on. I think once you have a season under your belt, it's easier to get your feet under the table, to have a squad that is able to compete in the division and build on it, rather than having to completely overhaul by bouncing between divisions. And that's the problem. When you start to yo-yo, to use a phrase that our director of football has used, it's an issue, right? It's because you end up overhauling the squad every year, and you lose your best players when you go down, and then you need to pick up new best players when you go up, because otherwise you won't be able to compete, and the cycle continues, and you end up in these terrible situations where you just can't get out of the mix. And I think that's it, right? So what it is get Fulham on the board enough points to stay up. Now, I think we'll be talking about record lows to stay up this year, because I think that we are in a period where it's just going to be really weird for teams in the bottom half to pick up wins. And given that, if Fulham can pick up a couple of wins this side of Christmas and get to a point where you're only having to average a point every game, I think you put yourselves in a position where you think, okay, we might be in this scrap. My worst nightmare is Fulham being 20th in February, 10 points cut adrift, or even just Fulham and West Brom being 20th and 19th, 10 points cut adrift, and everyone else complaining about, or everyone else, battling to stay up, and us just being there to be whipping boys. Now that is not good enough. If Fulham go down by the skin of their teeth on the last day, or we're competitive up to the last couple of games, you think, all right, it's been a weird league, and it's not great. You're not hoping for that. But I think that if you can be competitive to the end of the season, this team has quite a lot of quality in it now on paper. And you actually look at the side man for man, and you think, okay, that's not bad. Kenny Tete from Lyon, Joachim Andersen from Lyon, Adebayo is obviously signed from Man City, Robinson, who we've mentioned already. Lamina was excellent in that first season at Southampton, had a bit of a drop-off, and I was a little bit wary of him, but good player. Frank Zambo-Anguissa was unbelievable last year at Villarreal, drove them to Europa League spot. Tom Kearney, I think, proved on Monday night that he can cut it at this level if he's played higher up the pitch in that 10 role. And then you look at Ademola Lookman, who's lit the place up in his last years, and Alexander Mitrovic, who's scored goals, 13, 14 goals at this level for fun before. And yes, there's a little bit of a hole on the right-hand side, but, if you have one weak link in the entire squad, you're looking at a team that has a bit of balance. And there's a bit of depth there as well now, because of these additions, means that the players who were good last year are now rotating kind of bench options, and they are good enough to fill holes when needed. They might not be good enough to be Premier League starters, but they're good enough to be part of the squad and the rotation system. And given that, I think that if you get yourself to a position where you can fight, then Fulham might be in with a chance. The problem with last time round was we were so far adrift by the point that we actually worked out what the side was about, that we were basically already relegated.
Yeah, it was over in February, pretty much. It was pretty much done and dusted.
Yeah.
Yes or no, Jack? Do you guys stay up this year?
Yes, I'm going to be optimistic, but it's going to be grim. It's not going to be, this isn't going to be fun and roses. I think the best thing about, well, the only good thing perhaps to come out of the last time round is the last time round we came up playing that kind of swashbuckling, sexy style of football with a neutral's favourite. Everyone was, so excited about Fulham coming to the division, and we got absolutely hammered. And I think everyone, the Fulham fan base, was thinking, oh, maybe we could push 12th, maybe 13th. We could get ourselves up into that competition for the top half. And this time round, it is very much 17th is perfect. Thanks very much. We will take that. And there's a bit more grit and guile about this side than there was the last time, and I think that's important.
Yeah, so not as much sexiness, but that could prove to be advantageous when it gets tight towards the end of the season. Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the match on Saturday. So I always ask, because obviously I watch West Ham more than any other team. I have seen Fulham a couple times. I saw the Leeds game and a bit of the just highlights of the West Brom game. But so in terms of from a West Ham fan's point of view, what are some things that I should be worried about when my team comes in and faces Fulham?
This new left-hand side, I would suggest, is potentially a bit of an issue. It's one of those things where, we've got Lookman there at left wing and Robinson at left back, and they're starting to find a partnership. You're starting to see the cogs start to connect. I think that's where Fulham's danger comes from. You know, the amount of pace now on that wing in Lookman and Robinson is frightening. And I think that if Fulham are going to create things, that's where it's going to come from. The other thing is, if Tom Cairney continues this kind of renaissance of sorts, which has seen him in the last, I would say, 2 and maybe a half games, play further up the pitch, start to get on the ball and dictate, then he can be a problem. And what we've seen in the last couple of years is him try and duck back into a bit of an 8 role, pick up the ball a little bit more and control from deep. And it doesn't suit his game. You know, he suits being further up the pitch, being close to the striker, whoever that may be. It will be Alexander Mitrovic on Saturday, but whoever that may be, and being able to feed the players around him. And that's what he thrives upon. And now that we've seen Lamina come in, play at the base of this midfield, we've seen Anguissa come in, play a little bit behind him, and Harrison Reed can kind of rotate them in there as well. I think that he can cause issues. And I mean, look, the big battle everyone's going to talk about is going to be whatever Mitrovic can do. And Mitrovic is always part of the focal point of what Fulham are about. And I know there's a question over there about it, but he is one of those players that he blows hot and cold. And what we saw on Monday night was him kind of taking this assisting role. You know, he hangs and plays it across for Bobby Reed. He sets up Ola Aina. And I think that we're seeing a little bit more of him not necessarily needing to be the key man. Whereas last year, if it wasn't Mitrovic scoring, it was no one scoring. Now Lookman's in the goals. You know, now we're seeing the players around him, Bobby Reed on the right-hand side, picking up another goal. We're seeing the players in the middle look like they could cause issues. And it's taken the weight, I think, off scoring issues in terms of Mitrovic, and therefore hopefully will free him to play a little bit more of a looser game.
Gotcha. Just a quick question from the comments that I'm really interested in hearing your take. So Foe says, last time out, Fulham squad was brand new and had no team spirit. I'm not sure if Fulham have enough quality to survive relegation this season, and I really don't think Scotty Parker is good enough. Obviously, us at West Ham, majority of fans really, I think, love Scotty Parker, 3-time Hammer of the Year. He did go to Tottenham, but
we'll forgive him for that.
We'll forgive him.
We've forgiven him. We've forgiven him for going to Chelsea, so you're gonna have to forgive him for going to Spurs.
Right? Yeah, because he played. I think he even played more for Fulham than West Ham, if I'm not mistaken. But is he good enough as a manager?
So I've written off Scotty a couple of times, and every time he's bounced back and proved me wrong. Look, I don't think he's the most tactically astute manager in the world. He's not Marcelo Bielsa. He's not Nuno. He's not Brendan Rodgers. He's not one of these managers that is going to blow you away with a tactical masterclass. But he has proved time and time again that he learns his lessons. And what he does is he takes on the things that he's learned and then uses them to really kind of kick on. And I think the best example of this is Brentford, right? We came back off the coronavirus pandemic break and we played Brentford first game and we played really well for 70 minutes. And then on 70 minutes, Thomas Frank changed the game around. They won 2-0. That was the end of it. It was complete and utter, oh no, this is it. That's the end of Fulham getting promoted. End of, full stop. And then, obviously, the playoff final rolls around, and we're all terrified. Brentford, one, this is the biggest game in their club's history, and they will never shut up about it if they beat us. And two, it's one of those things where you're thinking, okay, we've seen Parker get out-coached twice by Thomas Frank this season already. And what he did was he switched the whole thing around, completely baffled Thomas Frank, and it was actually reasonably comfortable in the end, the playoff final for Fulham. We didn't let the BMW get going at all. We stifled them in midfield, and all the better chances came to us. Yes, it took a free kick to really break the deadlock, but ultimately, I thought we were the better side for the majority of the playoff final, and I think that in itself is kind of testament to what Scotty Parker does and what he's about. And if that happens, then perhaps he will learn these lessons and continue growing throughout the season. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the man to save Fulham or anything, but I think he deserves his shot, and I think he's earned that and earned the ability to take this team where he thinks he can take them. And at the moment, there are not too many managers out there that I think, okay, they'd come to Fulham and probably do a better job straight away.
Gotcha. Yeah, you guys really did. Quiet the BMW. I like that acronym in the final. I mean, I remember I watched that and Ben Rama was basically non-existent. Yeah. And it was really the first game I had seen of Brentford's from start to finish, and maybe the second game And when we were in talks to sign him, I know it's only one game, and you look at his stats. Ben Rama's, has been one of the best championship players over the last couple seasons. But
Oh yeah.
that game definitely was in the back of my mind. Obviously, going to give him a chance as a West Ham fan, but you guys did a phenomenal job at nullifying him and Watkins and the rest.
You should absolutely give him a shot, but
Yeah.
there are lessons to be learned from that game. Say Ben Rama is one of those players where if it's not going his way, his head will drop.
Yeah.
And that's no, there's plenty of players like that. It's not, and Fulham have many of them ourselves. Tom Cairney is often one of those players. But there is, I think something to, if it doesn't click for him straight away, it's going to be, I think, a struggle. And I think the really interesting thing is, and I'm talking to Dean Jones about this, who's our transfer expert on ranks, and he was saying that Moyes didn't want Ben Rama. He didn't want Ben Rama in the squad.
He wanted Josh King.
He wanted Josh King, and he wanted another centre half, and those are the things that he wanted. And I think it's because there are certain players that we've seen really, really do fit into this squad and really do drive things forward. It's this renaissance of Mikel Antonio has been incredible to watch, but also Jared Bowen, who had brought through at Hull and tore us apart at Fulham last year, and he's a player I'm absolutely terrified of. But he's a player that fits the mantra, right? It's not just about flair and guile. It's about, if he loses the ball, he will track 50 yards back to win it again as well. And all of those things are very, very important. And Ben Rama isn't that player. So yes, there's room for luxury players who are incredibly talented. And we saw that in the cup game this year, where he obviously nutmegs Michael Hector and just bends it like into the far corner from 30 yards. And you're like, oh yeah, he's a really, really talented footballer. But does he fit the model? I don't know.
Remains to be seen. You talked about being afraid of Bowen. So that was going to be my next question. As a Fulham fan heading into this match, what are you afraid of? I mean, you mentioned Bowen. Anything else?
Well, it depends. Obviously, there's kind of this quiet news that if Mikel Antonio is out, then I would be grateful. Sorry to upset everyone, but I would.
Yeah, I think he is going to be out. I think he's going to be out.
Now, I've seen a few little bits of chat about Seb Allaire over there, and I'm sure this is something that comes up a lot. Now, I loved Seb Allaire at Frankfurt, next to Ante Rebic, next to Luka Jovic, and I thought that front two that they had going was absolutely exceptional. Now, obviously he hasn't been worth the cost or all of these things. I'm not suggesting that he's been a good signing. I don't think he has, but I equally don't think there's any point that they're massively played to his strengths. And, I think he does suit a second striker off him. I think he does suit, the kind of system that allows him to win things in the air and all of these different things. So yes, I wouldn't say I'm afraid of Seb Allaire, but I still think there's a player in there somewhere. And if somebody can unlock it, then I would think that there's definitely a player there, and whether it happens at West Ham or not is a different question, right? Because I don't know if you're going to completely start switching up your stylistic nature every week to accommodate who plays in the 9. But if that does happen and you do go 2 up top, I think there is something to be gained there. And the problem is, are him and Antonio too similar if they were to play in a pair? Because they'll both want to be, winning aerial dominance. Obviously they're not the same player in terms of Antonio's speed off the mark and all of these different elements of it, but will they want to be the same player in a 2, perhaps?
Yeah, it's definitely, and as you mentioned in the comments, also Fo says Jack Collins is my new best friend. I think he agrees with you. But Hilaire has been talked about probably more than any other topic or player so far in the comments, and it has been the talk of the supporters since the Liverpool match, where, let's face it, Hilaire was essentially non-existent.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things there. One, he has played with Antonio up top twice, 3 times maybe. I think twice. And he scored both times. Hilaire scored both times. Yeah, small sample size, but, it has not been tried. We have not utilized him to his strengths. Very, very simple. It's obvious, and I do think some West Ham fans are a bit too difficult on him. That being said, I do think if you look at his effort, let's say against Liverpool, don't think it was there. Think it was there. Was not pressing. I'm not saying he has to run around as much as Mikel Antonio, but wasn't pressing the center backs. A center back pairing in Liverpool that Phillips, youngster, first Premier League start. Van Dijk, the best center back in the world, arguably not there. It was the time to take advantage of him.
Yeah.
And he really didn't. But I guess the third thing really is we've been really finding a nice little formation since the Newcastle match, which
Absolutely.
was our opening, which is 3 at the back, 2 wing backs, Masuaku and our new signing Kufal. You just put Susek and Rice right in front of the back 3. And then you have sort of like a 3-headed attacking monster of Fornals, Bowen, and Antonio. Now Haller, obviously. Obviously, if we put a second striker up there, I'm trying to think. It seems to me that wouldn't we have to get out of that 3 at the back system? Does it fit really with 3 at the back and then putting a second striker? I feel like you're just too loose in the midfield.
It depends. You could go 5-2-1-2, I suppose, is probably the way I would look at it, and have if your wing backs are going to cover the ground, then there's probably room to do that. I think what it does is it means that either Fornals or Bowen has to drop out, because I still think you keep the defensive kind of shield there in Susek and Rice, and then I think you have this you'd have this one sort of 10. In fact, obviously, recency bias aside, you could have Lanzini behind them. That's the actual 10 I would have in there. You could play Jarrett Bowen next to him, I think. I don't think you could play Pablo Fornals there. Pablo Fornals would have to rotate with Lanzini in that 10 spot, I think. But if you played, Yarmolenko could potentially go up there, and that's another player who kind of breaks that centre forward / winger mold. And if you could get one of those players around him, then perhaps there's kind of space to grow in that regard. That's not for me saying I would change it, by the way. I think if you found a winning formula, you stick with it until you have to change it. And just because one player's strengths aren't being played to doesn't necessarily mean that that's the wrong thing. It took a weird tackle and a soft, but I would probably say penalty, to actually lose to Liverpool, who are probably the best side in the league. Even with Haller absent, as you said, you still played okay. You held them to a 2-1, and with a little bit of luck going the other way, that game goes out differently, I think. And so I wouldn't change it, but if you were going to do it, I would go for 5-2-1-2.
I completely agree with you. I mean, it was a penalty. If Salah doesn't fall, I don't think it's called, and he certainly could have won an Academy Award. But yeah, I think we've been playing very well. The only match that we played poorly at was Newcastle. We switched to the 3 at the back system. We've been playing well ever since. Our 2 losses against Arsenal and Liverpool, I think we were hard done by not to even get a point. I don't think you just center it around one person. And at the end of the day, Sebastian Haller is a professional footballer. And we paid £45 million for him. And he's a good player. I think it's probably a little bit of a lack of confidence. But that 3-headed monster of Fornals, Bowen, and whoever's playing up top, it obviously was Antonio. It seems like there's always one of them that gets on the score sheet, one of them that is effective, and one of them that brings positivity to the squad. So, yeah, I don't think you change it at all. I completely agree with you. Sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of mentality. And we've been playing, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham pretty well.
I think it's also interesting on Haller. Like, you look at Luka Jovic going to Real Madrid, obviously a little bit different, but struggling there. Ante Rebic took a long time to find his groove in that AC Milan team as well. So it's not like this Frankfurt team have been broken up and suddenly there's stars everywhere. They were broken up and a lot of people struggled. So I would caveat with that.
Great point.
It's not all. It's not all on him, I think. So, but yeah, I don't. That's not to say he's performed. I think he has a lot to prove still, before anyone could ever say that it's been good or bad or indifferent, basically. But right now, if he was to leave West Ham tomorrow, you would say that was a poor signing.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I think West Ham fans at times have been too hard, but at the end of the day, results matter, performance matters, and it hasn't been to the level that we expected from a £45 million signing.
Absolutely.
All right, Jack. Well, we're approaching the 40-minute mark. We're gonna wrap it up. Obviously, can't wrap it up until we get a prediction for the match upcoming. So yeah, I'll always let my guests go first. Prediction for the match this weekend.
I hate predicting Fulham, but I'm gonna just gamble a little bit on Antonio being out and go 1-1. I think we played really well on Monday, and if that momentum can carry us forward, especially with a couple of key players out, I think we might just do it. And for me, any excuse to get anything on Declan Rice, because he obviously abandoned my beloved Ireland. So any result that makes Declan Rice upset, will please me. So 1-1 I'm going to go Declan Rice own goal.
Well, it's interesting. It's the first time it's happened all season. I'm also going to go 1-1. If you know anything about West Ham, you know that we play up to our competition, but we also play down. And no disrespect to Fulham, but I mean they're below us in the table. They were relegated pretty convincingly 2 seasons ago. And I think on paper West Ham is more talented. I simply think that's the case. Obviously, you played on the pitch. And what I think is interesting is that the 3 at the back system and sort of the 3-headed attacking monster, like I mentioned, has worked because we've been playing a lot of teams that we can soak up the pressure against, teams that hold a lot of the ball, and we can more easily counterattack from that. Against a team like Fulham that may not possess the ball as much as a Manchester City or a Liverpool or an Arsenal or even a Spurs, we may be put in situations where we may need to sort of tactically break teams down a little more, use little bit of more quality on the balls as opposed to just pure speed that we can get from Bowen or Antonio. And I think we may find that a bit more difficult to do. I do think we'll score. I think our defense will allow a goal to probably to Mitrovic, I'm thinking. So I'm just going to go 1-1. I'm not too sure what to expect, to be honest. West Ham could easily lose 3-0. I wouldn't be shocked, but
we could equally win 3-0 and it wouldn't shock me either. So
that's what I'm going.
Here we are.
That's why I'm going draw 1-1. Hopefully we're both wrong and West Ham can get 3 points, but I agree with you 1-1. Jack, thanks a lot, man. It was nice to meet you. Great talking to you, and yeah, good luck. Not too much luck, but good luck on Saturday, and stay on the line on the broadcast. But really appreciate it, man. Really
thank you, mate. Thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for watching. Pleasure.